In this video, we're going to do cell division. So we're going to look at chromosomes, the cell cycle, mitosis, and meiosis. So let's start with chromosomes. Remember, chromosomes are just highly coiled pieces of DNA. On each of your chromosomes, you have a number of sections of DNA called genes, and each one of those genes codes for a specific protein, which can then go on to make a trait. Now, you have two copies of every one of your chromosomes. One came from mom and one came from dad. They both have the same genes, and they're called homologous pairs. So remember, your dad gave you one set. So in this case, this is an organism that has 10 chromosomes. And so dad has given them one of each. Mom then gives them one of the exact same one. So now they have two sets of 10 for 20 total. So now they have a full number. Now in human beings, you have two sets of 23 for 46 total. Now remember, two of your chromosomes are sex chromosomes. Females are XX, males are XY, and notice the Y, much different, has different genes, and remember that's why males react to sex-linked recessive traits differently, because that Y chromosome has a different set of genes. Now remember, in your normal cells, these are most of the cells that make up your body, they have what's called the 2n number, which for human beings is 46. That means they have two full sets. Then you have your sex cells, which are just n. That means they only have one set, which is 23. And those are your egg and your sperm cells. And remember, when the egg cell is fertilized by the sperm cell, and that zygote is made, we need to have them both have half the number of chromosomes so that when they add them together, they have 46. So 23, 23 equals a normal baby with 46 chromosomes. All right, and then remember, we can set up your chromosomes into a karyotype, and there's a couple things the karyotype tells me. First thing, I can look at this thing and say, all right, there's 46 total chromosomes, 23 pairs, that's a human being. It can also tell me that this is a female because they have two X chromosomes. And in some cases, it can tell me, okay, this individual has Down syndrome because they have three number 21 chromosomes. All right, so now let's look at the cell cycle. And the cell cycle is broken down into a number of phases. And at first, we're going to look here at interphase. Remember, interphase is where the cell spends the majority of its time. I think of interphase kind of like practice, where most of your time is spent practicing, very little of it is actually spent playing a game. And in this case, we have 3 days of practice. We have G1, growth, S phase, and G2. I kind of think about G1 sort of like recovering. That's where the cell is getting bigger right after it has just divided. And then I think of G2 as kind of like that final walkthrough that you go to make sure everything's good. And for the cells, that's where organelles are being replicated. It's getting a little bit bigger, prepared for division. And then we have S phase. That's where you're really getting down to business and you're practicing. And in cells, that's where DNA replication occurs. So remember, we start with 46 chromosomes that are just normal. They just look like this, right? 46 of these. We are going to end with 46 replicated chromosomes that look like this. So if you see the X's, that means it's gone through S phase and has replicated. And the thing to remember is, at the end of S phase, you have the same number of chromosomes, but you actually have double the DNA. And that's going to be really important because if we're going to split cells in half, you have to double the DNA first, or else you're not going to end up with the right number of chromosomes at the end. Then we have cell division. And I think of cell division kind of like the game. That's the whole purpose of all this preparation, is to actually divide. And there's two halves to this game. First half is the nuclear division. That's where the actual chromosomes separate and the nucleus divides. And then we have cytokinesis, where the cytoplasm and the rest of the cell actually divides. So now let's look at mitosis and meiosis. These are my two forms of nuclear division. So remember, the first half of the game, nuclear division. The chromosomes are separating. And let's compare mitosis and meiosis real quick. So remember, I think of mitosis as making my cells. Because remember, the three ways that we use mitosis are growth, repair, and replacement. And that is just making all of my normal cells within my body. Meiosis, however, is used to make me. We're all products of sexual reproduction. Meiosis is what's going to make my egg cells and sperm cells, and so that's what's involved in making me. Mitosis, no genetic variation. Remember, we're making clones. Clones are not genetically different. Meiosis, however, does increase genetic variation. Sexual reproduction, meiosis, all of those things creates genetic variation. And the two ways that meiosis does it is crossing over, which remember, that's where homologous chromosomes swap DNA, and independent assortment, which is where the chromosomes from your mom and your dad randomly line up. So you give to your kid some of your mom's chromosomes and some of your dad's chromosomes. All right, so we're going to look real quick at comparing how mitosis and meiosis actually occur. So remember, we're going to always start with a two-end cell. And in this case, these have normal chromosomes. Now, really it looks more like this. The chromosomes are going to be unwound, and the DNA is just going to be floating around. Now remember, every cell goes through the cell cycle. So all of these cells are going to go through S phase first. So we're going to have DNA replication occur, the DNA is going to double, and so when the chromosomes actually form, we're going to end up with, we're still starting with 2N, but we're going to have replicated chromosomes. So notice these have 6 chromosomes which are replicated. Now the first step, nucleus is going to go away. And now this is the real important step right here. In mitosis, all the chromosomes line up vertically. That way one sister chromatid can go to either side and we can make a clone. In meiosis, they line up next to each other. That's how this first step we actually go from 2N to N. So now, when they split, sister chromatids in mitosis, homologous chromosomes in meiosis, when that nucleus reforms in mitosis, I've kept the same number of chromosomes. In meiosis, I've cut it in half. So remember, meiosis cuts the number of chromosomes in half. Then the cell is going to divide in cytokinesis. In mitosis, I've got 2 identical cells, which are both 2N. They have normal chromosomes, and so that process is done. Alright, I take 1 cell, make 2 cells, and that's it. Meiosis, I have 2 cells that are N. They only have 3 chromosomes now. Unfortunately, though, they have replicated chromosomes, and we can't have that. So that's why we have to go through meiosis 2. So meiosis 2, it's exactly the same as mitosis was. They line up vertically, sister chromatids split, nucleus will reform, the cell will divide, and now I end up with 4 cells. Every one of them has the N number of chromosomes. Notice they have 3 in this case. We started with 6. And we call these gametes. This would be either my egg cells or my sperm cells. And to me, an easy way to remember this is meiosis makes gametes. So if we look at comparing these from start to finish, we started with 6. In mitosis, we ended with 6. Clone. In meiosis, I ended with 3. I cut the number in half. Another way to look at that is 2N to 2N in mitosis, 2N to N in meiosis. I went from 1 cell to 2 and 1 cell to 4 in meiosis. If we look at them side by side, remember both of them I start with 2N. After meiosis 1, I've cut it down to N, but in mitosis, it's still 2N to 2N. I've made my clones. Meiosis, split again. Again, still have N cells, and these are gametes. And finally, if we look at this little chart, mitosis is involved in asexual reproduction. And remember, some organisms actually use mitosis to replicate themselves through a process called binary fission, but that's still an asexual reproductive process. So mitosis is asexual reproduction, starts with 2N, ends with 2N, with one cell division, 2 cells produced, and it makes clones. Meiosis, however, is sexual reproduction. It's not itself sexual reproduction, but it makes the cells that make sexual reproduction possible. Because remember, if I don't have cells that have half the number of chromosomes, I can't have 2 people combine their DNA to make a new baby. So we start with 2N and we end with N. Remember, that's that gamete. 2 cell divisions, 4 cells makes gametes, egg and sperm. And that is chromosomes, cell cycle, and mitosis and meiosis.